At a lavish seaside gala, the tech mogul's wheelchair-bound son was overlooked, left alone at the children's table. But when a single mother caught sight of him, she did something extraordinary. What happened next will remind you of the power of compassion. The unseen boy. The sapphire room of the Coastal Crescent Hotel glowed under the soft shimmer of seashell-shaped chandeliers. Servers in sleek navy uniforms wove through the crowd, carrying trays of crab-stuffed canapes and sparkling mocktails. The annual Tidewater Charity Ball was the crown jewel of Port Marina's social calendar, drawing tech tycoons, local influencers, and philanthropists who shelled out thousands for a seat. At the heart of the buzz stood Vanessa Caldwell, the polished CEO of Caldwell Tech, her tailored emerald gown catching the light as she networked with effortless charm. But her 11-year-old son, Noah Caldwell, was practically a ghost. Tucked at a small, linen-draped kids' table near the edge of the room, Noah shifted in his wheelchair, his hands fidgeting with the cuffs of his gray suit jacket. The other kids, offspring of wealthy donors, had already clustered together, giggling over a tablet game. None spared him a glance. No one asked his name. Noah adjusted his tie, the one his mother's stylist had chosen. "It's sharp," the man had said, as if appearances were everything. A server hurried past with a tray of shrimp skewers. Noah's stomach rumbled. He hadn't eaten since breakfast, but when he reached for a skewer, the server's eyes slid past him, focused on the VIPs. The tray tilted slightly, and a glass of sparkling water wobbled, splashing onto the tablecloth near Noah's lap. "Careful," the server muttered, as if Noah were the problem. Noah's cheeks flushed, his fingers tightening around his armrests. He knew this dance, the hesitant glances at his wheelchair, the quick looks away, the murmured comments. "That's Caldwell's son. Bike accident 2 years ago. Tragic." Across the room, his mother was deep in conversation with a venture capitalist, her laughter bright. She hadn't checked on him all evening. Then a stir. A young boy, maybe 6, with a mop of sandy hair and a slightly crooked bow tie, tugged at a woman's sleeve. "Mama," he said, his voice carrying over the hum of the gala, "why's that boy sitting all alone?" The woman, in a simple but elegant burgundy dress that hinted she wasn't a regular at these events, followed her son's pointing finger. Her face softened, not with pity, but with quiet recognition. Noah dropped his gaze to his untouched plate, his heart racing. He hated being the center of attention, but then he heard footsteps. The woman knelt beside his chair, her eyes meeting his. Up close, Noah noticed the faint paint smudges on her hands, the telltale signs of someone who might be an artist or crafts worker. "Hi," she said, her voice kind but direct. "My Theo says you look like you'd have the best stories here. Want to ditch this dull table and join us for some real fun?" Noah blinked, caught off guard. No one had talked to him like that in ages, like he was just a kid, not a fragile thing to avoid. He glanced at his mother, still charming the crowd, then at the woman, Clara, her name tag read, and her son, who was now bouncing on his toes, grinning like they were already buddies. For the first time that night, Noah felt a spark of warmth. Maybe he wasn't so unseen after all. Noah hesitated, his hands gripping the wheels of his chair. Clara, still kneeling beside him, waited patiently for his response. Her son Theo bounced on his toes, his bow tie slightly askew, his eyes sparkling with excitement. "Come on," Theo said, tugging at his mother's sleeve. "Our table's got cookies, and I put extra chocolate chips on mine." A quiet chuckle slipped from Noah's lips, surprising him. He hadn't laughed since his last physical therapy session, when the doctor's clipped words, "chronic nerve impairment," had landed like a weight. Clara smiled warmly. "See? Theo's already your biggest fan. If you don't join us, he'll talk my ear off about it." Noah glanced at his mother. Vanessa Caldwell was now engrossed in a discussion with a tech investor in a sleek tuxedo, her gestures animated as she pitched her latest venture. She hadn't noticed Noah's absence. "Okay," Noah said, his voice barely above a whisper. Clara stood, stepping behind his wheelchair, her hands hovering near the handles. "You okay if I push, or do you want to roll yourself?" The question caught him off guard. Most people either assumed he needed help or took control without asking. "I've got it," Noah said, a flicker of confidence in his tone. "Nice," Clara replied, stepping aside. "You're in charge." Theo darted ahead, weaving through the maze of tables, and Noah followed, his wheels humming against the polished hardwood floor of the sapphire room. He felt the weight of curious glances, the hushed whispers. "That's Caldwell's son. Why's he with them?" Clara's table was tucked near a window overlooking Port Marina's twinkling harbor lights, far from the gala's dazzling core. A half-drunk juice glass and a crumpled napkin sat in one spot, while a plate with a partially eaten chocolate chip cookie waited in another. "This is home base," Clara said, pulling out a chair to make room for Noah's wheelchair. "Not the fanciest spot, but the vibes are better." Theo flopped into his seat and slid the cookie toward Noah. "You can have mine. Mama says I've had enough sugar to launch a rocket." "I said no such thing," Clara teased, but her eyes crinkled with amusement as she sat down. Noah eyed the cookie, then Theo's eager grin. He picked it up, the chocolate smudging his fingers. The first bite was rich and warm, the best thing he'd tasted in weeks. "So," Clara said, leaning forward, "you a regular at these fancy shindigs, or is this your first time swimming with the sharks?" Noah brushed crumbs from his chin. "My mom drags me to every one. Says it's good for the company image." The last part slipped out, and he froze, but Clara's expression stayed kind, though her eyes held a quiet understanding. "Sounds familiar," she said. "Theo's my date tonight because his aunt's on a cruise, and I couldn't afford a sitter on my art teacher's salary." She shrugged. "Figured he'd at least score some free cookies." Theo nodded gravely. "And soda." Noah's lips curved into another smile, unfamiliar but welcome, like rediscovering something he'd forgotten. Then a shadow loomed over the table. "Noah." His mother's voice was smooth, but carried a sharp undercurrent. Vanessa Caldwell stood there, her emerald gown catching the light, her smile practiced for the gala's crowd, but her gaze fixed on Clara, cool and calculating. "Mom," Noah said, his voice shrinking. Vanessa's eyes didn't meet his. "Thank you for looking after my son," she said to Clara, her tone polished but firm. "But we have investors waiting to meet him." Clara held her gaze steadily. "He's welcome to stay if he'd like. We're just getting to know each other." A moment of silence stretched, the air thick with unspoken tension. Vanessa's smile didn't falter. "That's generous. But Noah knows his responsibilities." Noah's chest tightened. He stared at the cookie crumbs on his fingers, the warmth of the moment fading. "Then actually," Noah said, his voice soft but steady, "I want to stay here." Vanessa's perfectly composed expression faltered, her lips tightening. For the first time that evening, she truly looked at him. "Noah," she said, her tone quieter but firm, "this isn't the moment." Clara leaned back in her chair, arms folded casually. "Sounds like it's exactly the moment. He's got something to say. Maybe you ought to hear him out." The air around the table grew heavy, a bubble of silence amid the gala's hum. Nearby guests glanced over, their conversations trailing off. Vanessa's phone vibrated in her clutch, but she ignored it, her eyes narrowing at Clara. "We'll talk about this later," she said to Noah, her voice low, then to Clara with polished sharpness. "Enjoy your evening." She turned and walked away, her heels clicking against the polished floor. Noah let out a shaky breath, his hands trembling slightly. Theo, unfazed by the tension, nudged his arm. "So, you into superheroes? 'Cause I have so many thoughts about which ones are the coolest." Clara laughed softly, shaking her head. "Here comes trouble." The moment dissolved, the gala's chatter flooding back. For the first time in ages, Noah wasn't the tech mogul's son. He was just Noah, and that felt like enough. The mogul's crisis. Vanessa Caldwell's sleek heels tapped sharply on the hardwood as she moved away from Clara's table, her thoughts spiraling. The buzz of the Tidewater charity ball blurred into a dull roar, overshadowed by the pressure building in her chest. Noah had challenged her in front of strangers. Her phone buzzed again, another notification. She ignored it, needing space. Slipping through a glass door, Vanessa stepped onto the hotel's balcony overlooking Port Marina's shimmering harbor. The salty night air stung her face, but it cleared her mind. She gripped the railing, her manicured nails pressing into the metal. What was Noah thinking? He knew these events were critical. Every smile, every introduction was a step towards securing partnerships, upholding the Caldwell legacy. And yet, he'd chosen to stay with that woman, some art teacher who didn't belong in this world. Her phone vibrated again. Reluctantly, she glanced at the screen. A post on X, at the elite Tidewater ball, it's kindness that shines. #humanity over status attached was a photo. Noah grinning, actually grinning, as Clara handed him a cookie. Theo was mid-giggle, his bow tie crooked, while Vanessa, blurred but recognizable, walked away in the background. Her stomach churned. The post had thousands of likes, hundreds of shares. Comments flooded in. Who's the mom ditching her kid? That teacher's got more class than Caldwell Tech. This is why I skipped these snob fests. Vanessa's breath quickened. This wasn't just a personal slight, it was a PR nightmare. The board would see it. The media would pounce. And Noah. Her fingers hovered over her PR team's contact. She needed a statement, a counter-narrative, something to. Vanessa. The voice stopped her cold. Elliot Caldwell, her ex-husband, stood in the doorway, his scarf loose around his neck. His face carried new lines, etched by the years since the accident, but his eyes, Noah's eyes, held the same piercing clarity. "What are you doing here?" Vanessa asked, her voice betraying her shock. Elliot stepped onto the balcony, the door clicking shut. "I get an invite every year," he said evenly. "I usually don't come. But I'm not here to watch our son get sidelined in front of your investors." Vanessa's posture stiffened. "I didn't sideline him," she said, her voice low but sharp. Elliot's gaze held steady, unflinching. "I saw the photo, Vanessa. And I saw Noah's face when you walked away." A muscle in Vanessa's jaw twitched. "He was fine. That woman was causing a scene." "Was she?" Elliot raised an eyebrow. "Because from what I could see, Noah looked happier than he's been since the accident." The words hit like a tidal wave. Vanessa turned back to the balcony railing, her fingers digging into the cool metal. "You don't get the stakes," she said tightly. "I get that our son is 11, Elliot cut in, his voice firm but not unkind. "He's been through more than any kid should. And tonight, for the first time in years, someone made him feel like he mattered. And you couldn't stand it." Silence fell, broken only by the distant crash of waves against Port Marina's shore. Elliot exhaled, his shoulders softening. "I'm not here to argue. Noah texted me. He asked if he could come home with me tonight." Vanessa spun around, her eyes wide. "What?" "He's in the lobby right now." "He doesn't want to go back with you," Elliot said quietly. The words cut deeper than she expected. For a moment, Vanessa couldn't respond. The harbor breeze whipped around them, carrying the faint clink of glasses and murmur of the gala, a world that felt impossibly distant. Elliot studied her, his expression softening but resolute. "When was the last time you actually talked to him, Vanessa? Not about his grades or rehab or the company. Just talked." She had no answer. Elliot nodded, as if he'd anticipated her silence. "I'm taking him tonight. But this isn't just about one night." He turned to go, then paused. "That teacher saw him when you didn't. Think about that." The glass door closed softly behind him. Alone on the balcony, Vanessa stared at her phone, the screen's glow burning into her vision. The photo, the comments, the undeniable truth staring back at her. Somewhere inside, Noah was leaving with Elliot. And for the first time in years, Vanessa Caldwell felt utterly lost. Morning light streamed through the expansive windows of Vanessa Caldwell's cliffside penthouse, casting stark shadows across the sleek hardwood floors. She stood in her home office, still in her gala gown, her phone pressed to her ear as her PR manager's voice buzzed through. "The board wants a response by noon, Vanessa. The Chronicle's running a story. They're calling it the Lone Table Fiasco." Vanessa pressed her fingers to her temple. A fiasco over a cookie, and Caldwell Tech stock was down 5% in pre-market trading. She ended the call abruptly and dropped the phone onto her glass desk, where it clattered against a framed photo. Her and Noah, years ago, at a beach in Port Marina. He'd been running through the surf then, his laughter louder than the waves. The intercom chimed. "Ms. Caldwell." Her assistant's voice. "There's a visitor. A Ms. Harper." Vanessa's head jerked up. Clara Harper stood in the foyer, looking out of place against the penthouse's sterile elegance. She wore a simple sweater and jeans, her hair tied back, a faint smudge of paint on her wrist. Her hands, calloused from years of shaping clay and canvas, rested calmly at her sides. "You've got quite the fortress out there," Clara said, her tone light but direct. "Took me half an hour to get past your security." Vanessa stood in her penthouse foyer, arms crossed tightly. "Why are you here?" Clara held her gaze steadily. "Noah texted Theo this morning. Said he's staying with his dad after some argument you two had." She shifted, her paint-smudged hands clasped together. Kid sounded pretty shaken. A muscle in Vanessa's cheek twitched. "My family isn't your business." "It is when my son's upset because his new friend's hurting," Clara said, stepping closer. "I'm not here to start trouble. I came to tell you about Noah." "You don't know my son," Vanessa cut in, her voice sharp as a blade. The words lingered, brittle and heavy. Clara let out a slow breath. "Maybe not, but I know what it's like when a kid feels like they're fading into the background." She reached into her tote bag and pulled out a folded sheet of sketch paper. "Theo made this for Noah. He insisted I bring it myself." Vanessa didn't move to take it. Clara set the drawing on the sleek console table. It was a child's sketch of 3 stick figures, one with a messy bun, Clara, one in a wheelchair, Noah, and one with a crooked bow tie, Theo. Scrawled above them in bright crayon, Cookie Crew. He's a great kid, Noah, Clara said softly. Sharp, kind. But he's carrying a lot, and it's not just the wheelchair. Vanessa stared at the drawing, her throat tightening with something she couldn't name. What do you want, Harper? Clara studied her for a long moment. When my partner passed, I almost lost Theo too. Not to some tragedy, just my own stubborn focus on work, on keeping things together. Her voice grew rough. Took me too long to see he needed me there, not just successful. The distant hum of a harbor bell echoed through the open window. Vanessa's phone buzzed on the desk, another board member, no doubt. She let it ring. You think a quick chat solves this? She asked, her voice quieter now, less biting. Clara shook her head. I think you've got until noon to decide what's worth more, your brand or your son. She turned to go, then paused. And that viral photo? It's not the worst thing that could happen. What is then? Vanessa asked, almost inaudible. Clara glanced back, her eyes steady. The day he stops hoping you'll see him. The penthouse door closed softly behind her. Alone in the silent foyer, Vanessa picked up Theo's drawing. The paper was creased, smudged with what might have been paint or tears. She traced the outline of Noah's stick-figure grin. Her phone rang again, board members, reporters, the world closing in. For the first time, Vanessa Caldwell let it go to voicemail. The Tidewater charity luncheon filled the sapphire room of the Coastal Crescent Hotel with its familiar grandeur, but this year, the atmosphere crackled with tension. Reporters hovered near the entrance, their lenses fixed on the stage where Vanessa Caldwell would soon speak. Whispers rippled through the crowd. This was her first public appearance since the Lone Table scandal went viral. Would she address it, apologize, or double down? Backstage, Vanessa smoothed her tailored blazer in front of a mirror, her reflection paler than usual, shadows under her eyes betraying a sleepless night. 3 days had passed since Clara's visit. 3 days of Noah's quiet absence, boardroom chaos, and headlines tearing into Vanessa's parenting. A knock sounded at her office door. Miss Caldwell, her assistant said, peering in. They're ready for you. And your son just arrived. Out in the laurels of Port Marina's sapphire room, Noah sat near the front, his wheelchair positioned for a clear view of the stage. Elliot stood behind him, a steady hand on his shoulder. Nearby, Clara and Theo waved enthusiastically, their presence a mystery. No one knew who'd invited them. The crowd's murmurs grew as Vanessa stepped onto the stage. Camera flashes sparked like fireflies. She gripped the podium, her voice steady but vulnerable as she began. Before I start, she said, her words cutting through the hushed room, I owe an apology. Not to the press or the investors, but to my son, Noah. I thought success meant giving him everything, except what he truly needed, my attention. A ripple of surprise moved through the audience. You were never invisible, Noah. I was just too focused to see you. Noah's eyes widened, glistening faintly. Vanessa nodded to an usher, who wheeled out a second podium, adjusted low for a wheelchair. If you're up for it, I'd love for you to join me up here. The room went still. Noah glanced at Elliot, who gave a reassuring nod. He looked at Clara and Theo. Theo flashed 2 eager thumbs up. Slowly, Noah wheeled himself up the ramp to the stage. The crowd erupted in applause as he reached Vanessa's side. She knelt beside him, her silk blazer creasing against the floor, her hand gently covering his. You're the bravest person I know, she whispered, just for him. Only if you borrow Clara's cookie idea and actually listen this time, Noah said, a small smile breaking through. You'll ruin my outfit, he added, glancing at her knees. Worth it, Vanessa said, her voice warm with conviction. Standing to address the crowd again, her tone was firmer. The Caldwell Foundation's new initiative won't just fund accessibility research. It'll reshape Port Marina to include people like Noah from the ground up. She paused. And our first hire is Clara Harper to lead our inclusion task force, because real change starts with those who truly see others. Clara's eyes widened in shock. Theo let out a whoop, sparking laughter through the room. As the speech wrapped up, Vanessa stepped back, letting Noah take the microphone to announce the Foundation's first youth ambassador, himself. Oh, he added, grinning at Theo, and my official co-chair, Theo Harper. Later, over dessert, featuring a now famous chocolate chip cookie, Vanessa found Clara by the refreshment table. You were right, she said quietly. Clara shrugged, a faint smile on her lips. Just a mom who messed up first. She nodded toward Noah and Theo, now debating cookie toppings versus ice cream flavors. Those two will keep us in line. Vanessa watched Noah laugh, a sound brighter than any stock surge or board vote. A camera flashed somewhere in the room. This time, Vanessa didn't look away.